And Abigail gave everything she had to a boy who changed his mind. And we both cried, 'cause when you're 15 and somebody tells you they love you, you're gonna believe them. And when you're 15, don't forget to look before you fall. I found time can heal most anything, and you just might find who you're supposed to be. I didn't know who I was supposed to be at 15. Take a deep breath, girl. Take a deep breath as you walk through the doors. Two doors down, they're laughing and drinking and having a party. Two doors down, they're not aware that I'm around. But here I am, crying my heart out, feeling sorry. But they're having a party just two doors down. I think I'll dry these useless tears and get myself together. I think I'll wander down the hall and have a look around. 'Cause I can't stay inside this lonely room and cry forever. I think I'd really rather join them two doors down, yeah. Two doors down, they're laughing and drinking and having a party. Two doors down, they're all aware that I'm around. See, I am no longer crying and feeling sorry. We're having a party just two doors down. I can't believe I'm standing here, dry-eyed, all smiles and talking, making conversation with the new love I have found. I ask him if he'd like to be alone, and we start walking down the hall to my place, waiting two doors down, yeah. Two doors down, they're laughing and drinking and having a party. Two doors down, we're not aware that they're around. 'Cause here I am, feeling everything but sorry. We're having our own party two doors down. Oh, 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 two doors down, baby. Oh, 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 two doors down. Oh, 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 two doors down. Oh, 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 two doors down. Two doors down, they're laughing and drinking and having a party. Two doors down, we're not aware that they're around. Oh, yeah. We am feeling everything but sorry. We're having our own party. Two doors down, yeah. Two doors down, they're laughing and drinking and having a party. Two doors down, we're not aware that they're around. Here we am feeling everything but sorry.
We come into this world unknown, but know that we are not alone. They try to knock us down, but change is coming. It's our time now.
Hey, everybody
people like us, the people like us. You just gotta turn it up loud when the flames get higher. Sing it for the people like us, the people like us. They can't do nothing to you, they can't do nothing to me. This is the life that we choose, this is the life that we lead. So throw your fists in the air, come out if you dare. Tonight we're gonna change forever. Everybody loses it. Everybody wants to throw it all away sometimes. Oh, people like us, we gotta stick together. Keep your head up, nothing lasts forever. Here's to the damned, to the lost and forgotten. It's hard to get high when you're living on the bottom. We are all misfits living in a world on fire. Sing it for the people like us, the people like us. You just gotta turn it up loud when the flames get higher. Sing it for the people like us, the people like us. We are all misfits living in a world on fire. Sing it for the people like us, the people like us. You just gotta turn it up loud when the flames get higher. Sing it for the people like us, the people like us.
It's UUCC Zoom-in live with special guest, Dr. Allan, Georgia. Here's your host, David Kantor, with co-host Jenna Bradburn.
Hey everybody, good evening. Glad you're with us tonight for episode 3 of UUCC Zoom-in Live. We're glad and grateful that you're with us this evening. Happy that our congregation's been supporting us by showing up for this, and we're glad that you're here tonight. But you know, this is still a young show. This is only show number 3. So every episode has another first. And this evening's first is that tonight is the first show being co-hosted by Jenna Bradburn. Jenna, say hello to everybody.
Hey y'all.
So as you might know, you might recall, we had Will Smith was here a couple of weeks ago. Will Barrett was here a couple of weeks ago doing his best Will Smith imitation. Will Barrett was with us a couple of weeks ago, and he'll be with us a couple of weeks from now as well. But tonight we have Jenna with us for the first time. So Jenna, tell everybody who you are, who's your family, and how long have you been going to the UU Church? Talk to us about that.
So I've been going to the UU Church my whole life. My parents are married there, so I'm daughter to Rose and Mark Bradburn. I've got a younger sister named Jillian. And yeah, we've kind of been chilling at the church ever since.
Chilling at the church. That sounds like a great name for a song. We'll see about getting that one on the air in a couple of weeks. So Jenna, where do you go to school?
So I go to school in Twinsburg. I'm a sophomore this year.
And how's school in Twinsburg working out? We asked Will a couple of weeks ago. You know, he goes to Kent State. So we asked him what the early COVID college experience was like. So what's the early COVID high school experience feeling like?
Well, it's interesting. So I chose to do virtual. So my school had a hybrid option and a virtual. I chose to do virtual just for consistency of schedule and less stress. And it's been difficult. The adjustment's been interesting, but I'm floating along okay.
Floating along okay. All right. So we asked everybody this question. So how are you coping with COVID? What's different for you about COVID?
I think the biggest difference for me would be not being able to see people as much. I'm a very social human being, and so not being able to constantly see my friends over the summer or go and visit my grandmother or my nana, it was just very odd to be home and to still be home.
So, everybody, we opted to have co-hosts like Jenna and Will with us so that basically you weren't seeing the show through the lenses of an old fuddy-duddy like me. So because we have Jenna and Will with us, we get different music, we get different perspectives on the kinds of things to talk about with our guests. And so hopefully you'll see the benefit of that as time goes on as well. So, doing the show hopefully gives us all a way of getting together every couple of weeks to hang out, given that we can rarely be together in person. So if you've been with us before, thank you very much. If this is your first time with us, we're hoping that this becomes part of your regular twice a month routine. So thanks for being here this evening. Now remember, if you have not already done so, please use the chat function at the bottom of the screen there and let everybody know that you're here, because people want to know who's here from their congregation. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be a handy thing to do. And while you're doing that, I'm going to introduce our first mini guest for this evening, long-term member Jack Ullman, who many of you know have from prior shows. Of course, Jack is the master of the punny joke. And because of that, we have the Jack Ullman Comedy Moment, where we get our every 2-week joke from Jack. So Jack, what's tonight's entry?
Good evening, David and Jenna. Thanks for having me back for another edition of Jack's Jokes. David, I think I hear Mary Ellen in the background. There was a time I didn't speak to my wife for 2 weeks. I didn't want to interrupt her. Tonight's joke is about a lovely bride and her seamstress. The bride hired a designer of some reputation to create a beautiful and unique gown for her special day. When the dress was completed, the seamstress explained to the bride that there were 6 very expensive yards of material left. She suggested a negligee for the wedding night. That would at least use 1 or 2 yards. The bride said, use all 6. The seamstress asked, why such an extravagant waste of material? The bride explained, I'm marrying a Unitarian Universalist, and they'd rather seek than find. Well, that's it for Jack's jokes. Back to you, Jenna and David.
Oh,
Thanks,
no.
Jack. Well, I happen to have heard a joke yesterday that was a church-related joke, but I'm not going to do it tonight. You guys have to wait for another couple of weeks for that one. I'm not trying to top Jack's joke tonight. Well, in these days of the pandemic, of course, we're always looking for ways for us to get together, and our small group ministries have never taken on a more important focus for us than they have right now. So we're lucky to have with us this evening in the audience, Amy Collins, who's one of our commissioned lay ministers, who is in fact focused on our small group ministries. So Amy, we're going to put you on screen for a minute here and have you chat with us about small group ministries. So Amy, are you there?
She's not.
Amy's not there.
If Amy's here, she needs to put something in chat because I can't find her.
Well, in that case, Amy, are you not there? Really? Wow. Okay. So Jenna, we don't have Amy right now, so I guess we're going to move on with our show. What do you think?
All righty, let's do it.
Do you think we've kept Allan waiting long enough? I mean, the whole idea was to keep Allan in behind the screen and in torture for a while. So what do you think? Time to bring him out now?
Let's bring him out.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, our special guest this evening is Dr. Allan Georgia. Allan is the Director of Religious Education for UUCC after holding the same position with the predecessor congregation at First Unitarian. So everybody, please take yourselves off of mute and give a warm UUCC welcome to Dr. Allan Georgia.
Yay!
Allan, you got to take yourself off of mute and you got to turn your camera on. There you
Hello.
are. Great. Thanks for being here tonight. Appreciate
I'm going to
it.
insist that all of my forthcoming Zoom meetings have the same kind of applause because that's
Hey,
fantastic.
Every one of my guests gets more applause than I do, and that includes you. So there you go. So how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well tonight. Doing very well.
Glad. So we asked this question for everybody to kick things off. So how are you coping with COVID?
How am I coping with COVID? I mean, when I think about all of the ways in which definitely all kinds of people are struggling, I feel like I have it very easy. I say it to every time I'm in a meeting with parents who are dealing with young kids. I always say I feel like I'm playing COVID on like the easy mode of the video game, while everyone else is playing like the very hardest, like expert version. So I know I'm very lucky because a lot of things in my life are not overly complicated to navigate. But I think I'm with everybody here when I say I'm really sick of this. And there was those beautiful few months when you could say things like, when things get back to normal, back in like April, when that was still like a coherent thing to say. And now that we're at this stage, I really just have stopped even pretending I know what the future will look like. So it's really just a day by day kind of an experience for me.
This is, so as a UU, of course, we always talk about life as a mystery, and this, of course, is a mystery on top of a mystery, on top of a conundrum here. What are you missing most because of COVID? What's driving you the most?
Missing most. That's a good question. Well, one thing I really miss is occasionally I used to like bring a computer into a public space and do like a little work or kind of have a change of scenery for a moment, and I had no idea what a little pleasure that was, which of course is kind of gone. But if I'm looking for one thing, I will say for sure, I was just a very attentive moviegoer, and there's like nothing worse right now than going to a movie or being in a room with a bunch of people, for several hours breathing the same recycled air. So I really look forward to a time when I can go back to again what seems like such a small pleasure, but I really miss it.
So I miss going inside a restaurant, and I like being in crowded places, like being in movie theaters and ballparks as well. And obviously, I'm not doing any of that stuff right now.
Any of that stuff, I didn't say.
I feel your pain on that, absolutely.
A plane as well, I guess, is going to add to that as well. There was a time I could, get into this device and appear somewhere else in the world, and one day I'll do it again.
So let's get into a little bit about where you come from. So how did you end up landing in spiritual stuff? How did you end up going this route? I mean, when you were 6 years old, you saying, you know what, when I grow up, I want to be, and was this it?
David, I really wish I could say that that's very far from the truth, but it's not that far from the truth. So no, this is a good question.
Joking, honestly,
Yeah, no, and I appreciate actually having a chance to answer it, because one thing I will say, especially to a UU congregation and kind of being sensitive to what brings a lot of people to UU congregations, is I feel like a lot of people's experience of religion is seated in trauma of some type or another, some kind of an experience or some kind of an upbringing that was either repressive or just difficult in some way. And I understand that that's an important paradigm that people have experienced God, and this is something that shifts how they respond to religion as a phenomenon through their whole lives. I have an unusual background in that my grandfather on my mother's side was a Methodist minister, but he became that after converting from Judaism.
Well, okay, time out here. So
Yeah.
everybody can put this on their screen there. Grandfather, mother's side, Methodist minister, had been a Jew.
Yeah, exactly. So he was born into he was without a doubt the least successful strand of the Jewish family from Chicago.
Moshe Feinstein became a Methodist minister. Is that what you're telling me?
No, this was actually, I guess, his father, but yeah, a family full of I've always been told judges and doctors, and he ran a hotel in Chicago. So in any case, he married a British Methodist, and for years was just sort of an agnostic, and then over time became converted to Christianity and then became a minister. So all I can say is that at least at a little modicum level, some of those questions I had to ask. I mean, that was a lot of personal background to kind of wonder about. But the other side of it is when I was in elementary and middle school, I did without a doubt the coolest thing a middle school kid can do, which was I sang in an English style boys choir. And what was,
that is, of course, we always think is the coolest thing to do in middle school.
Without a doubt, you can't
That's
imagine
what you were thinking, right?
how popular it made me.
When he said coolest thing, you were thinking English style boys choir, right?
At a time when saggy jeans ruled the roost of popularity, nothing was cooler than a choir boy frock, for sure. Cuffed pants was, really the best I could do. But no, I bring that up to say what was interesting is that it was an English style boys choir, but it was not affiliated with a church or anything. It was completely secular. But of course, you can't do that. You can't sing choral music and avoid religious music. I mean, there's so much of it. So in a weird way, those two things conspired together to just make my experience of these religious questions the opposite of traumatic. They were extremely engaging. They were extremely, they drew me in. So yeah, from a pretty early age, I was on this path, one way or another.
So how did you find UU then? So I understand questions about religion and spirituality, but how'd you end up landing in UU given the Methodist background?
So I'm a little I'm embarrassed. I hope nobody's I don't ruin my sense of intimacy with the congregation by saying it was Indeed.com actually that helped me find the church. I'm sorry to say. No, the reality is and I'm trying to tell the most sort of simple version of the story, but I had gone to seminary with the idea of becoming a minister. Institutional politics being what it was, I decided instead to go to grad school afterwards. So I had done my MDiv work, and I got actually a second seminary degree. But then because basically the Methodists in Ohio were bumming me out, I ended up going to grad school instead. And having finished that up and being in Cleveland, this was after actually, so I'd lived in New York to go to grad school, then I moved to Cleveland, which is where my wife is from. And then I actually was back in New York for a year teaching. And then when I came back, I was just applying to anything that was relevant, really, like sort of across the board. And the thing is actually doing religious education is an important part of any seminary education, but most churches do not prioritize it enough to give it any kind of a role. And it so happens that UUs are one very important outlier for them, is that they really take religious education seriously. And so that's what brought me to the sort of application process. And of course, from there, it was a whole learning experience. And I knew what I knew from, all my church history background about, where UU churches had come out of. Like I knew like the tradition, but I didn't really know what individual UU churches today looked like. And of course, they're all very different. So that was more of a learning process once you all decided it was okay if I stuck around.
So what grabbed you about religious education as opposed to, I don't know, anything else that might be related to spiritual stuff in our society?
Well, so to me, spirituality being such a huge like concept in like religious thinking, religious education is just for me a place where it's okay to not know things. I mean, the whole very concept of education is that you're coming from a place of where you need to understand more, you need to learn more, and there's a humility there that allows you to ask your questions and bring your concerns and those kinds of things. So to me, it's a very live and very rich place to bring those things. So I'm very impressed by the way in which the UU tradition has really held on to this in a way that other churches just have kind of lost. Other churches, I would say, have more of an indoctrinating approach to religious education, which I both mean in kind of a negative and also a non-negative way. Because I mean, if you're learning about your faith tradition, of course, that's an entirely reasonable thing to do. But there's not always room for questions.
So let's talk about a couple of things specifically related to UUCC. So let's start with the obvious question. I hope it's obvious. What are the plans for religious education this fall for UUCC, for both youth and for adults?
So speaking of COVID, COVID has had a huge impact on just everything, obviously, about what our church is doing. And religious education is part of this, except that what I can say is that we really did our best to plan. And then even then, our plans are kind of exploded in various moments, because of course things have shifted so much for all of our attendees. Our youth are in school situations. Jenna, like you're describing navigating a high school situation. We have youth of all ages in different school scenarios, and people are feeling different kinds of things. Not to speak ill of this program, of course, but some of us are sick of being in Zoom meetings and things like that. So in other words, that's been a real up and down. So what we've done this year, which was the product of a lot of conversations from years past, was to create an hour that was dedicated to RE that wasn't at the same time as the service. And what I can say, like for our larger benefit of our conversation here, to say that was really kind of a revolutionary example, because one thing I do think is important for us going forward is to allow worship, our time together, to be this really central thing that we do together. And so the idea of having RE is something that can happen, not at the same time as that for our young people is going to be part of that. So that was the goal for this year. But we've made some shifts about our programming because of some of that Zoom fatigue and things. So we're creating a calendar that's going to hopefully keep our wiry program going, but be a little bit more responsive to where people are at. And then at the same time, to do the other part of this, which is I think something that UUs do better in concept than in fact, which is treat ourselves as lifelong learners, because all of our adults should be bringing their questions. These, our religious lives, our spiritual lives are things that grow and develop forever. We never stop developing them. And every year that you get older, you have new insights to bring, you have new ideas to test out. So we have built an ARE program that's built actually into our strategic planning model to have courses that are there to support our areas of community focus with the goal that people can engage with them in a meaningful way. So for our wiring families, I hope you've registered. I've sent out emails, so you will have seen those. And for all of our adults, please look at our offerings. They're going to be happening before services and is a real chance to dig in deep. If you're a UU, but maybe a new UU, there's a chance to learn more about that. If you'd like to just expand your understanding of religious ideas, there's going to be a class for that. And if you'd like to engage in social justice, there's going to be a class for that. So a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, Eileen McCulley was on a couple of weeks ago, and she was here. She talked about the ARE offering that she's leading, I guess with Lori Albright and some others related to prisons, bail systems, stuff like that.
That is yeah, and this was such a great thing of these things coming together, because Lori and Eileen have been doing that work and have been really sort of hands deep into it, and this is a chance to take that format and in a different kind of a context, dig into some of the issues so that people have a better sense of what's going on there and a better sense of what's at stake there. So those kinds of offerings, this is our first one, but we're going to keep doing that so that our the things we want to do in the world are also things that can occupy our spiritual questions.
So I want to switch gears for a minute now and still talk about UUCC, but I want to talk about a little bit about the behind the scenes stuff. So we see you as part of the Sunday service almost every week. And I guess what I'm wondering about is, how do you decide what you're going to talk about during any Sunday service? I mean, how do you decide? How long does it take? Do you do your videos in 1 take or 14 takes? How does all that work?
Those are great questions. That's how do I decide? So one thing I'll say is that we have a very collaborative worship process. Like, this stuff definitely is not the product of one person, pushing forward. It's very much a conversation, and it comes out of themes that have been assigned over time, and of course, hearing where different directions are going to go. Reverend Joe, of course, will have an idea about what a service is going to look like, and then we'll kind of respond from there. So it develops organically, for sure. But as far as the deciding goes, there is a gutness to it, a gut instinct element. Where I would say it's kind of you're trying to synthesize and respond to something. And for me, I've taken very seriously the idea that A Time for All Ages is this. It's an inheritance from an old model where which I think a lot of churches still use, of kind of a children's story. Like it's very kind of that dimension, and I really tried my very best to take that concept and explode it in as many different directions as possible, both making it relevant to different audiences and try to connect things in different ways. The reality is it's impossible to tell a story that can link every single person together. So what I'm usually looking for is something that's going to be the thing in a service that if like an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old we're going to talk about, that there would be something relevant there. So that's why daily experiences, which of course are few and far between now in the COVID days, man, it's hard to talk about daily life when daily life is so boring, but those are usually rich, or other things that are maybe part of our kind of cultural landscape can be so important. So I'm usually trying to make some kind of a connection there. And what I will say is that that is an area I actually have always found very, very rich for myself, is finding spiritual resonances in cultural things. So it's work I'm happy to be doing. And then of course the actual recording process. My gosh, as you can imagine, this is a totally new thing for most of us. And before March, I had never made a video like the ones that I'm making now. So it's been, I mean, I've been learning this whole time. So so what I will say is that there was a time when getting one of these together was an arduous, very time intensive process. Depending on what I'm doing, it might have gotten better, but it still is there's still a decent amount of work involved. So, but now I've gotten better with the software and what I'm doing. So
I typically put together a video promo for each of the shows here, and for me that's all new as well. And if Jenna's happens to have been in a couple of them, and if she hadn't told me, oh, don't worry, it's not that hard to do, I would have been even more fearful of trying to get it done. But once she told me, of course, it wasn't that hard to do, I was going to be darned if anybody was going to help me with it. I did it all myself. And so, for better or for worse, what those videos look like, Jenna is clearly the star of those videos, but nevertheless, the actual technical work I'm actually doing myself. And if you had told me 6 months ago I know how to do that, I would have told you I want to have some of what you're smoking.
It's true, and the learning continues. So here we are.
Jenna, what were you going to say?
I was saying, you would text me at like 2 a.m. just like slightly panicked and just being like, I hope it's okay. And I'm like, it's probably fine. Like, you're overthinking this, but you're so bloody stubborn and you won't let anyone help you.
Alas, my family knows that about me, but I'm sure my church family here doesn't know that about me at all, about me being stubborn at all. So Allan, tell us a little bit about, we talked a little bit about, you're being, wearing frocks and being in a boy band. But tell us a little bit more about your upbringing, where you're from, how large your family was when you were growing up, what were your early interests and hobbies? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I, and this is, I guess, relevant because at least as I've met people around, a decent amount of us are from Ohio. I've weirdly spent a lot of time in Ohio, but I'm not from here. So I grew up I was born in Southern California, and then actually grew up in Southern Florida. So I went to high school in Broward County, which for anybody who was watching the news in the 2000 election, we're the county that it somehow always comes down to in Florida.
Hanging Chads, baby, hanging Chads.
Exactly right. Yeah. So that's where I grew up. And then I to say I got out of there quickly is kind of an understatement. I made a mad dash for the exit. Florida being famously described as God's waiting room. I was interested in finding other parts of the world as quickly as possible. So I actually went to college in Indiana at a Christian college called Taylor University, and then ended up in Columbus for seminary. Then I lived in New York for several years in grad school, and then moved to Cleveland because randomly having done all that work in Ohio as a seminarian, it's where my wife, who I met in New York, happened to be from Cleveland. Bizarrely, my brother.
No, wait a second. You met your wife in New York, but she was from Cleveland.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And bizarrely, my brother, who is a percussionist, went to the Cleveland Institute of Music here. So weirdly, when I came to live with my, where my wife is from, he was actually living down the street, bizarrely. So go figure. These things conspire in strange ways. But yeah, no, the upbringing experience was very much one of public schools and a very dynamic world in South Florida. I will say, this was actually the city I moved to from California ended up being in the 2000 census. So I graduated high school in 2001. And in that census year, that was the largest growing city in the country, was actually where we had moved. So in the time that I lived there, it changed in drastic ways. And of course is now notorious because actually the city I had moved to is now where Marjorie Stone and Douglas High School was, where the Parkland shooting happened. So that was actually one of my, local high schools.
Wow.
So, no, I was kind of in a hurry to grow up, to be honest. Florida was, to quote Monty Python, it was a silly place, and I was happy to get to other places. So
I understand that you have a big interest in superheroes, comic books, stuff like that. So you didn't talk about that at all, except for alluding to how you can find. You hiddenly alluded to it before about how you could get spiritual stuff out of popular culture. So talk to us about you, how you get involved with comic books, who introduced you to them. Talk about that a little bit, and then talk about how that intersects in your mind with the spirituality piece.
Yeah, and so this is really funny. It's a strange thing. I was explaining to somebody the other day, actually, that just a bizarre fact of having been born when I was born is that I feel like I kind of grew up with technology in a weird way. Like when I was in high school was like when American Online was brand new. So like nobody had IM'd before, but right when it was appropriate for me to be IMing was available. So I kind of like it very much happened that way. And in a weird way, I feel like my entire life is the world weirdly taking seriously the stuff that was just beloved when I was a kid. Like my childhood things suddenly become like very serious. So like when I was a kid, superheroes and comic book culture was just part of the cartoon landscape that was like, you know, was just out there. So it was just like part of the, I collected cards, I collected the comic books, I collected all those elements that on television was the X-Men animated series and then the Batman animated series and all these things. And then of course I got to college and then they're making really highbrow versions of these things. And Star Wars, which of course had been an inheritance from a previous generation, you know, I was then sort of like, you know, ninth grade is when the prequels begin to come out and things. So, you know, you see this like suddenly serious take on Star Wars as well. So in a strange way, it's been seeing this happen, you know, sort of through my life. But I'm always interested in the ways in which some of these things that seem most popular and kind of most, I don't want to say low brow, but like most broadly appealing, can actually be where some of our most sort of deep and important kind of priorities lay. So for me, the advent and kind of the success of the superhero genre in film is to me like I know people get annoyed by it and it's sort of like, you know, this exhaustion of, oh, I'm so sick of seeing some new thing over and over again. But, you know, I don't know, I look at the world that we occupy and all of the ways in which things like idealism and sureness of purpose have kind of fallen out of our political culture, and then see that we keep telling the story to ourselves over and over again. It feels like a kind of cultural remembering or a desperate hope to hold on to those things. So so for me, those are really rich areas, and of course they're also really fun at the same time. So you know, they really keep going, and it's wonderful now that I can be talking with David Kantor, who, if you all don't know, is a fantastic comic book nerd, to use that in the very most positive sense, but also bring it up with like our YRE classroom and talk with kids who I think Jenna, as I recall, I brought it up, and you know, you're one of the people who mentioned that going to see some of those movies was like part of your growing up. So like it really bridges a huge, I mean, that's, you know, fantastic.
Well, if you go from Jenna's age group to mine, you've got like a 90-year age span there. So there you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Allan, who's your favorite superhero? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so I'm sorry to do this, but I have to split it. I go in two directions here with the superheroes, because I really like the close to home kind of like the street level superheroes. I really appreciate that. And then I really like the cosmic kind of dimension. So without a doubt, my two favorites are Daredevil, who, if we don't know who that is, and also a perfect example of why comic books can be so powerful. He is the first disabled superhero. I mean, it's like literally what he is known for. He is a blind superhero whose blindness factors into why he is super heroic. He's and the other thing which I love about him is that he's not a minimalist, but he really knows what he's capable of doing, and he is there to watch over a single neighborhood in New York.
Hell's Kitchen.
He's like, I can't do the whole thing. I can't be Spider-Man. I can't, you know, be all over the place. He's like, I'm in Hell's Kitchen, you know, which ironically, you know, is a very changed neighborhood, I think, in the career of Daredevil.
We don't have to worry about Hell's Kitchen too much these days. That's right.
I say back in the day, you know, immigrant heavy, you know, impoverished area. Now it's mainly galleries and cupcake shops. So that's the street end, and then the other side is like the cosmic side. So I've always loved the Fantastic Four, and they're kind of like, you know, the Galactus and just, you know, all those gigantic cosmic questions that come from there. So,
hey, Jenna, is there anything you want to ask Allan?
I want to ask Allan some questions.
Please.
So I understand that you put in 100 hours of work a week for our congregation, which I'm sure we just greatly appreciate. But I want to know a little bit more about your personal life. How did you meet your wife? What did she do?
So yeah, my wife is without a doubt my the best part of the stories I could tell about myself are all wrapped up in her. And I will say she's comes to our of course, when we meet in person, she has been to and comes to our congregation from time to time. But she's also a member of Church of the Covenant. Is that correct? I want to make sure I have the name right. But the Methodist Church on Lee. So she's she has her own church background here in the
Church of the Savior, she just said.
Sorry, Church of the Covenant is the Presbyterian one. I knew I was going to get it wrong.
Church of the Savior. But you were close. You got 3 out of 4 words right.
Yeah,
That's not so
exactly
bad.
right. Yeah,
3 out of 4 ain't bad, Alan. It's all right.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So and I'm happy to tell sort of the sappiest version of the story, which is I actually arrived in New York. I had been married previously. I got married when I was very young, and my marriage ended while I was a grad student. So nothing like. In fact, I because apparently I really like swinging at the hardest pitches, I made sure or somehow managed to have it so that I would do my comprehensive examinations and get divorced in the same year. Comprehensive examinations are that's probably the most intense element of a PhD program. So why not throw several life events all onto one another? Yeah, exactly.
Nicely played, Dr. Georgia.
So yeah, so that having happened, and then facing being sort of a single person in New York City, I did dive in pretty quickly because I was ready to move on, and it so happens that Claire was the person I met immediately. She was the first person I contacted, which I didn't know this at the time. This is a huge element of gender bias in dating experiences online, especially in a place like New York City. Is it turns out men are kind of terrible. So it turns out, by which I mean prospects are not necessarily great, and so the numbers are actually bizarrely out of whack. So there's probably I don't know, 3 or 4 times as many kind of women who are looking for guys in New York. So I didn't realize how kind of lucky I was in that element. But so we met there, and meeting and dating in New York is a very unusual thing because everyone's just living a different kind of a life, and age expectations are very different. It's not unusual to be single in New York well into your 30s. Whereas a place like Ohio, I feel like it's things are always a little bit earlier. But all that is to say, certainly when I met Claire, it was clear something serious was going to happen, but she was also in the process of moving. She had already had those plans in place before we met one another. So I kind of assumed, I was like, well, I'm obviously newly single, I can't get it right the first time. So I sort of assumed she was just going to move away and that would sort of be it. But contrary to my expectations, we made it work long distance for several years. And then when, we were certainly ready, but also a big thing about living in New York City, of course, is that just living there is so expensive that to have the prospect of living elsewhere is like giving yourself a raise, basically. So when I had worked out a way to, I was able to do some online teaching through Fordham, where I was attending, and moving to Cleveland, it worked out well financially. So that was kind of a process, and then we were here for a while before we were married. Actually, just before I started at UUCC. So she is obviously, I think she's fantastic and wonderful. She is also very professionally accomplished. I like to brag about her because she manages the digital marketing wing of Sherwin-Williams Paint. Wow. So she does all of their it's email and social media and all that kind of digital side of things. Which it's funny you tell me about how hard I'm working. Actually, I will say I have the luxury of weeks that kind of go up and down. Obviously we have a summer where things are a little bit less, and it can be real fluid. And I have seen Claire work in ways that have always put me to shame. in terms of consistency and just like drive and always being there. So weirdly, coming from two worlds, both academia and ministry, where there's the idea of sabbaticals and time off and things like that, Claire is always like, no, I don't know what those things are. What are you talking about?
Yeah, Jenna was joking about you. We believe that Claire works very, very hard. And you got one more question for Allan, right?
Yes, I do. So this is a question that I like to ask people that I come in contact with pretty much at any point. So if you could tell your past self one thing, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, that's a great and really hard question to answer. Because I will say, and I'm sure this is a very common experience, there are definitely moments, especially when I get to like, you know, really significant moments in my life where I'm like, man, if I could just run this back one more time, I'd do it. Like I would, you know, it's not like I want to change huge things, but like I would love to do it like, just better along the way. So the one thing I would tell a past version of myself, you know, I think a thing that is easy to lose track of for us as people in 2020, because I do think we're experiencing the world in this kind of brand new way, and actually most of the world has actually lived through a kind of a more slowly paced and a more kind of reasonably paced experience of the world. Is that I think when I was younger, I had the sense that I really had to get these things done. I really had to hit these marks. I really, like, there was a real sense of drive of like, you know, I just have to do it this way. So there was a lesson that a younger version of myself could have learned, that it would be something about the idea of like, there's all kinds of time. And that's both should shift where I think our expectations are at, but I think it should also really shift our values about what then we do with that time and like how we care about it. Because the abundance of time that we have means that some of the expectations we put on ourselves are unreasonable, but it also means that we're doing something wrong with it if we're just waiting for it to pass. The worst use of time is to be annoyed that it's around, because you know we all have these brief shots to be part of the world. So that's to be some version of that. That, or probably I'd find whatever that one embarrassing moment is that really gnaws at the back of my head and be like, don't say that stupid thing that time, or like, don't, you know, whatever it was that, you know, that's probably the other thing I would do.
Well, you only got one. I got like 2,000 of those, but never mind. I got one last quick question.
Whatever the worst one is, that would be the one where I'd be like, don't say that thing at that time because you're going to feel like an idiot.
I got one last question for you for a quick answer before we go to break. So if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
So I thought real hard about this because this is, of course, a great question, and one I feel like I've loaded myself up to have some kind of profound answer. But I'm going to go in a real opposite direction here, which is to say, a deep fear of mine that I really regret is a deep fear of the ocean. I have a real thalassophobia, they call it, because it's one of those things that it's very spiritual. It's both awe-inspiring and also like horror-inspiring, just the idea of the vastness of the ocean and all that.
And it's really wet, right? It's really wet.
I mean, it's like it's much like I think of flying in a plane. I just look at it and I'm just thinking, I know we're not supposed to be doing this. This is just not, like, we do not belong here. We are supposed to be on the ground. That's where we're supposed to be. If we're in the water, if we're in the sky, it's something we've gotten ahead of ourselves. So what I decided I would say is that the superpower I wish I had would be just to be like Aquaman, because I would love to experience the ocean without fear, because I just could like talk to the fish, you know, like that would be great. I would feel so much more comfortable seeing the wonders of our undersea world if I was, you know, able to be, you know, in conversation with the whales or something and be, you know.
Well, you're going to join me and dive right in right now, babe. Hey, so listen, we're going to take a brief break right now and have Allan come back and answer some of your questions, audience. So if you have a question for Allan, use the Q&A button to ask your question. We're going to take a 3-minute break right now to get ourselves organized. And when we get back, we'll have Allan taking your questions. UUCC Zoom-in Live, back in 3 minutes.
on the road must have a code that you can live by, and so become yourself, because the past is just a goodbye. Teach your children well, their father's hell did slowly go by, and feed them on your dreams, the one they picked, the one you know by. Don't you ever ask them why, if they told you you would cry, so just look at them and sigh, and know they love you. And you of tender years can't know the fears that your elders grew by, and so please help them with your youth. They see the truth before they can die. Teach your parents well, their children's hell will slowly go by, and feed them on your dreams, the one they picked, the one you know by. Don't you ever ask them why, if they told you you would cry, so just look at them and sigh, and know they love you.
And we're back. That was Teach Your Children by Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young from the album Deja Vu. That album was released 50 years ago in 1970. So yes, I kind of feel a little bit old right now. But Allan, now that I feel really old, how about you? Are you ready to take a few questions from the audience?
Absolutely.
So let's start at the beginning. Lori, you want to get started? Lori Albright?
Sure. So I thought I heard you say going to Teal, and I thought you said Vienna, and I know there's a Teal College in PA. So I'm just curious where you went.
I'm sorry, I must have cut out there or something. It's actually Taylor University.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, which is in Indiana, and it's a small evangelical school. What I will say, to both clarify and parse this out a bit, I actually went to an evangelical school with all the idealism and optimism of youth, because I knew I was going to go into ministry, and I thought I should do my best to understand people from all different faith traditions and backgrounds, having no idea that that was going to be a bad idea. But so I ended up in a place that it really didn't have a lot of room for me or the questions I was asking or my approach to things. But it was still a learning experience, very much in the sense of what I got from there. But it did, my attendance there was very much coming from a place of what I hoped at the time was an openness to just where the world was. This is, of course, back 20 years ago when things were also very toned down. So.
Muriel McNulty, you got a question for Allan?
I do. Hi, Allan.
Hello.
I want to know if those guitars and mandolins and whatever in the background, can you play all of them?
Well, all the guitars are basically the same, so I definitely can play all of them. I'm a much better guitar player than mandolin player, I'm sorry to say, but mandolin is something I really enjoy, and it's my own little area of never wanting to totally get away from musical exploration. So that is, and actually it was a gift from my wife.
Very cool. I
yeah.
like how they're all displayed there. I like it.
I was actually saying before the show started, I'm getting a lot of beneficial lighting to make this room look much cooler than it is. It's really more of an
I'm just
upstairs.
saying it looks very nice the way it is.
It's it looks really good from here, but the wood paneling is not necessarily very attractive if you're more.
I have some of that in our house too.
Understood.
Dave thinks it's okay. It's being sanded out and painted.
Understood. Understood.
Yeah. Oh, she didn't tell you about all the guitars we have in our background, on which I play several at the same time, but that's another.
Yeah, not happening. Not happening.
Hey, Laura, you had another question for Allan.
Am I unmuted? Okay.
You are unmuted.
Okay. So I hesitate to ask this question because I don't even want this thought to enter your mind, because I want you to be happy here at UUCC for a really, really long time. But if you were ever going to engage in a next step professionally, what kinds of things are you thinking about?
Well, that's wonderful. I appreciate the question, and yeah, this is a sticky one. Obviously, well, I can say a few things at the very least. When I started at UUCC, I was certainly open to the larger UU world, but I have since learned that there probably isn't a good venue for me there, because of UU, very much internal to UU sort of processes. So I do think whatever I'm doing in the UU world will happen in our congregation. And I want to definitely emphasize the fact that I am open to evolving in this context. So like I certainly would, last thing I want to do is like close a lot of doors or like act like, you know, I'm only willing to do one thing or whatever. So I'm definitely open to a lot of things. What churches are and what churches will become in the next 20, 30, 50 years are very big open questions. And I'm happy to live in an uncertain space there, as long as I get to do good work. So I'm happy to be doing that. But you also have asked a very relevant question, which is wrapped up in the fact that both the church world and the academic world, which is the other side of my professional life, are both in, I mean, to be honest, and talk about growing up with an evolving situation, universities and colleges have just imploded. If people aren't aware of that more broadly, it should be more widely known. We're in a real crisis of higher education right now, especially in the humanities, but also across the board. And that comes with just a lot of questions that I am not the only one struggling with, but I do have questions about how do I continue doing some of that stuff. So what I will say is that I'm ready to think creatively and be open to different opportunities. And also, even though I am not I think I'm a pretty down-to-earth person and don't have a lot of material expectations for myself. I am certainly an ambitious person. I hope to grow and become more of who I am. So those questions are real ones.
So Del and Lou Salza, Allan, the check you paid them, sent them in advance, is clearly paying off because they don't have a question. They do have a comment they want to share though. So Del or Lou, you should unmute yourselves now. One of you guys should read what you guys wrote on in the Q&A about how lovely a person Allan is. Don't be shy. Well, they are being shy, so I'll read it. I don't know whether this is Del or Lou wrote this. They wrote, I can't think of a question right now, but I just want to say that I have had some questions that had bothered me for a long time, and I had a wonderful time talking them over with Allan, back when we could occasionally just hang out and talk things over. I appreciate Allan's insights, his immediate grasp of the torturous aspects of some of these questions, and his humor. So I
think I can at least say something about this.
You should have sent them a very big check for that.
I will be happy to do so. Yeah, thanks, Del, knew that you really come through for me there. But what I want to say, which is I think relevant and very good part of this part of the show, is to say, as somebody who is not from a UU background, but who definitely feels at home in a UU space, I've gave a sermon about this. I have taught about it in other contexts, and it's a thing I think needs to be nailed home to this congregation and other UU congregations. Is, without a doubt, the most prophetic, the most spiritually rich thing I think the UU tradition has to offer to the world is this idea of universalism, because it is a towering claim to make. It is a huge thing to say about the world. This idea that everyone is, it's traditional theological modus in the concept of salvation, but the idea of the inclusion of all, because oh my goodness, talk about a political year where it's real easy to think of people that you just want to exclude out entirely, but to see the redeemability of all people, that's a huge thing. So I want to stress that, and I think that might be what Del was talking about, Del or Lou.
So we have time for just a couple more questions. First, we'll go to Mary Ellen McNulty. Mary Ellen, you have a question for Jenna. So Jenna, heads up.
Oh, this is an embarrassing question for me.
I
No,
have to unmute. It is, but that's
yes, it is, but it's actually a question for Jenna, though. So
okay.
Jenna,
Allan, you can live with it. Jenna, how do the kids react to Allan? Do they think he's quote unquote cool? Okay, you guys might have another word for it instead of cool, but
probably groovy, Mary Ellen, probably groovy.
yeah, right. Or is he just some other adult who's talking at them?
Quite honestly, like, I know I can't speak for absolutely everyone.
I get that.
But Allan has been such a wonderful addition to our RE family. He's so engaging to talk with at every level, and like whenever I have a question, or he'll sit in classes and he'll participate and like let us like be part of the conversation for the congregation. And as a teenager, like that has been so rewarding to be able to have that in the church community.
Excellent.
Obviously very sad. Thank you very much, Jenna, for saying that. And what I will say is, Jenna, I really appreciate representing the best possible youth answer. What I will say is that, especially for the like 5th grade and under, what I've learned is that food just covers a multitude of relevances. So pizza.
Oh, I think that's the same in the high school.
For me too.
It does, but I don't think they could put it in other terms. They just would accept it and say, as long as
Pizza in the high school, Jenna. Pizza.
So Jenna,
100%.
if you haven't already gotten a check from Allan for the way you answered that question, if I were you, I'd talk to the Salsas and find out how big a check they got, and that's the same amount of money. Time for one last question. Terry Robbins, you're on with Allan, Georgia.
All right, I want to ask, actually, I started out thinking Allan, but I'd like both of you to,
Who's both of us?
Jenna and Allan, not David.
That's okay.
Jenna and Allan. What is, from the last few years since Allan's been around, a favorite memory of an experience for our Sunday school?
Allan,
And I'll let you start.
Dang it, too polite. So I guess the most recent one that I can think of is he came into our class, the high school class, and he asked us about what we were looking for in the congregation, how we wanted it to grow. And that was just so fulfilling to listen and be heard with all of our wants for more diversity and more like acceptance, and talking about things that are difficult to talk about, because UU congregation is so open. We just wanted to open it up a little bit more, and just having him listen, that was just kind of my favorite thing most recently. But also anytime he does like the time for all ages, he always has the best stories, and I don't know where he comes up with them, but they're just so great.
And I want to share, what I want to say is we were at a really kind of interesting transitional period in Jenna's 8th grade coming of age year. And like, it was just because of where the different kind of cohorts were at, and John Bacon had been working with the groups before, and we were kind of in this transitional moment. And what I have to say is that when that coming of age year Sunday happened, was like probably my favorite service that we've done, like of any service at the church. So similarly, seeing our youth, like Jenna, so then we had Will last week, and then we have other ones who are in the wings as well, represented well by Jenna this evening. We just have a great group of kids, and of course, hoping that we continue having that that culture of wiry is a real lucky thing we have.
So sorry if we ran out of time, gang, to get everybody's questions here. Each episode around now, we're going to read your emails and texts with your comments, suggestions, and questions. And by the way, just so you know, we're not above bribing you to have you share stuff with us. So each show will select a winner from those who sent in a note, and the winner will receive, ta-da, their own UUCC Zoom-in Live mug. But I have to say, it just vanished on me.
It's disappearing.
The disappearing mug. Liquid for the mug, however, is not included. A few comments from last time from Jane Hill. I'm glad to see you're trying something new and providing an interesting medium to connect. Nice job. From Cindy Taylor. Thanks, David. You do a wonderful, entertaining job as MC and originator. Loving the Zoom in. And from Jack Ullman, if I can find Jack's comment here. I thought last night's show went very well. The addition of Will, a younger person as co-host, is brilliant. My only concern is that we're going to get to a point like church service where the announcements go on and on and on. With a song here and a committee for that, all vying for time and cutting into the 1 hour that you have. I hope you're able to figure out some way to keep that restricted. At any rate, job well done last night. Thank you, Jack. Jack gets the mug for this week. Thank you, Jack. I'll see a way of getting it to you. So that's tonight's show, gang. Just as a heads up, next show is 2 weeks from now. Jenna, what's the scoop on our next show?
Next show is October 14th with special guest Melissa Vandergriff, who chaired our strategic planning task force and is a former president of the society. Melissa is a senior executive at Hillcrest Hospital in her day job, so we're likely to hear about church strategy and some stuff about healthcare too. I won't be here next week. Will Barrett will be back to co-host with David, but we hope to see you there.
Thanks, Jenna. Let's give a big round of applause to Allan George for being with us here tonight. Thank you, Allan. We loved hearing your stories. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And let's give a huge round of applause to Carol Day, our board president, who produced tonight's show. As I said before, Jenna and I do the easy stuff. Carol has to make sure all the stuff actually happens. So thank you. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up now, but if you'd like to catch up with your fellow congregants, there's a link in the chat function to a UUCC Zoom room. No host, no guest, just a chance to chat with your fellow UUs. And by the way, if you want to hang around just a few minutes now, we have a great wrap-up song tonight, Boys of Summer by Don Henley. Allan and Jenna, I'll say good night, everybody. Good night, everybody.
Good night,
Good night.
everybody.
Everybody, thanks for being here.